My farm's going non-GMO on all of its pork production. We all have that right. You as consumers should have a right to have labeling. If this state would want labeling of GMO, non-GMO foods, you should have that right. If this amendment passes, it jeopardizes those opportunities for the farmer and for the consumer. It's our Constitution. It only takes a simple majority to add to it. It takes 2/3 to change it. If we're having problems in this state, there's nothing that prevents the state legislature from addressing those with state laws. But to ask that we would enshrine the opportunity for corporations to have rights within our Constitution is just wrong. And I'm asking folks to vote no, and have joined in with Baker Seed Company, and really would appreciate your going to the polls, that's Tuesday, and voting no on Constitutional Amendment number 1. There are ways the legislature can act. And I think our Constitution isn't the place to put a whole bunch of junk in it, because we don't know 20 years down the road it takes 2/3 of a vote to change it, and it only takes a simple majority to get it there. So I'm saying to the people, if we have a problem in agriculture, let's lobby and let's go to Jefferson City, let's talk to our legislators, and let's get it fixed. But let's don't enshrine this stuff in our state constitution. This provision is going to go into your Bill of Rights. Section 1 of your state constitution, right along with freedom to speak, freedom of religion. It makes no sense to, I'm in agriculture, I'm a farm boy, I'm proud of that. I have a twin brother. He and I are farmers, and we're proud of that more than anything else, perhaps our children, and he's got grandchildren now. But the Constitution is not the place to give an industry, mine or anybody else's, a right. It's where people's rights should exist. Thomas Jefferson in 1812 in a letter said that unrestricted corporations would be a greater threat to this form of government and this people than the standing armies of our enemies. James Madison, in writing in 1822, wrote, he said, the unrestricted, of course, remember Hamilton wanted a national bank and corporations. I don't remember if you remember that big fight that went on back in the day. James Madison wrote and said that these unrestricted corporations would simply build the wealth and consolidate the land, no different than the landed wealthy we fought in the Revolutionary War, and we need restrictions on corporations. Our founding fathers understood that corporations are fictions. Somebody just filed a piece of paper. Most of these larger corporations in the U.S. are filed in Delaware because it has more lenient laws than any other state. But they're just a piece of paper. They're not people. They shouldn't have that right enshrined into our constitutions. That's reserved for people. In the 8th grade, my teacher beat me about the head till I could pass that constitutional test. And she taught me it was the people's law. It was a little 3-room schoolhouse in Rush Hill, Missouri, and I at least got that much out of my education. It's not where corporations should reside. Our founding fathers understood that. They were right then, they're right today. People from the outside can't force things onto farmers or you, the citizens in the state. Only you, through an initiative petition, or the state legislature can. Putting this in the Constitution is not the same as having it in the statute where later it can be changed. If the Family Farm Act in Missouri is not working, it's been there since 1975. If it's not working, then the legislature should change it so it protects the farmers the way they need to be protected. But it should not enshrine corporations in our state constitution in the name of doing that. We're at a crossroads in America about what kind of agriculture and food system we're going to have. And there's really two sides to this, and they are pretty legitimate. And it really depends on what you think agriculture and food should look like in America. Over the last 30 years, we've been marching towards corporate control, industrialization of agriculture. Everything from who controls the land, the seeds, to how animals are going to be caged or not caged, how restrictions, permits will all be handled. In 30 years since I started hog farming, this region was the national capital, feeder pig capital in the world. More little feeder pigs came out of South Missouri than anywhere else in the country. Did you know that? We had at the time when I started pig farming 67,000 family farmers raising pigs in Missouri. Last year we had 69,000 left in the country. I say having those animals spread out across the land, supporting family farmers, small family farmers, is better than caging them all in about 200 units in North Missouri and pooping up my darn drinking water. Four companies, corporations in the world, control over 60% of the meat proteins. Pork, beef, poultry, and lambs are controlled by 4 companies. Because we've been on a march. 1 million fewer family farmers in America since I started farming. And we've been on a march to industrialized ag. And there are some of the neighbors out there are hitched up with those big corporations. That's just, they chose that's the future's big or get out. There's a gubernatorial candidate in Nebraska that openly said we need less farmers, not more, it's more efficient. Iowa State University indicated that you reach efficiency on a hog farm with 60 sows. That doesn't seem too big to me, but they think big is better. And they think that using every brand new technology is the way to go. Drives more efficiencies. Google Dr. John Eichert and see what the Ag Economist has to say about that. He says that the industrialized ag system was supposed to produce more food cheap enough that we could feed the hungry. But yet today we have more people hungry in America than when we started this march for industrialized agriculture. We have more pollution than we had before in our waters, creeks, and streams. When I was a young man, I could go fishing with Grandpa. Today I can't around my home. Dr. Eichert says that we can no longer afford this cheap food policy. So Google Dr. Eichert. He's an expert in that field. But there is 2 pathways. Today, we have a choice. You can say what we want is what I consider true, traditional family farm agriculture with transparency in our food system, no different than you get right here. Folks saving the heirloom seeds, concerned about whether GMOs are really what we need to have in our environment. Or you can say big's better. Get high tech or get out. Joe's old-fashioned. God love him. Him and his brother's done good, but their day's gone. Just close the chapter in America on that kind of agriculture. That's the decision you have to make on Tuesday. So they have their side. I have mine. I'm damn proud of mine. I'm fighting every day. Every day. Because corporations don't belong in my Constitution. And they sure as heck don't belong owning all the farmland in Missouri. Well, I'll tell you what, they deceive us in the ballot language. When you read the ballot language, it says a citizen's right to farm. I'm for that. I'm a citizen. That's the whole point. But that's what they put. So when everybody reads it, they're going to say, well, yeah, I'm for that. But you read the language, it does not say citizen in the language. It says farmer, farming, and ranching. The definition of farming includes not only the raising the product, but also the processing of it. So it's even broader than the kind of folks who are going to be controlling the raising of it. It also includes the processing. Yeah. That's why it impacts whether or not you can label GMO or non-GMO food products. When I say a fiction, it means it doesn't have a heart or a soul. Or as my good friend in Nebraska says, the president of the Farmers Union, or a butt to kick. It's just a piece of paper. It was filed by a group of individuals, sometimes 3 or 5, depending on the state's law. They said, we'd like to join together and raise some money selling shares. And other people give them money, and then they go out and do their business. It's a way to finance a business idea. Railroads, the railroad barons controlled this country little bit before the Civil War. Clearly the Civil War began to define it, and right after the Civil War we really saw the railroad barons. They were heavily involved in the election of Abraham Lincoln. Did you ever wonder why a country lawyer from Illinois could be president of the United States when Illinois was dang near the frontier at the time? He was a railroad lawyer. He was a railroad lawyer. And they wanted him to run because they wanted him to appoint certain people to the Supreme Court because they wanted to gain human rights under the 14th Amendment. So, one good thing about Abraham Lincoln was he didn't do it. He got elected, but he wouldn't appoint who they wanted. So, the railroads had a clerk of the court they hired. And he put a footnote, this clerk put a footnote in a decision, a Supreme Court decision. The following court used the footnote to declare corporations did have certain rights as individuals in our U.S. Constitution. The last decision along those lines was Citizens United. So there's been a series of cases slowly giving corporations more and more rights as if they were people. Citizens United said that they could have free speech and hide all the millions of dollars they want in these campaigns. So they're now funding most of these elections across our country since then. Both D's and R's, independents, it's bipartisan. But the last decision in that series of decisions just happened a couple of years ago with Citizens United. So corporations have slowly been finding their way into our Constitution. Today, with this particular amendment, they're wanting to find their way into our state constitution as it governs the laws of our state. Oddly enough, James Madison offered an amendment in the Constitutional Convention. There were a lot of them offered that were not accepted. We have 10 amendments in the Bill of Rights, as you know. One of the amendments that was offered was to restrict corporations from having that which they've now been granted in our U.S. Constitution. There is a movement afoot in the United States to put that on the ballot as a new amendment. It would take 37 states. I may be joining that fight right after we beat them here. Because corporations do not belong in our Constitution. Our Constitution is the people's law. It's actually a sacred document to a large extent. We got to be darn careful how we fiddle with it. Especially if there's other remedies. And the other remedy is if there's a problem in agriculture, the legislature could deal with that next year in the legislature. We don't need to change our Constitution. There's some good flyers I know over at the seed store on the counter.
Yeah, I got that.
Baker Seed has done a great job of having that set out around here. I would recommend that they're as good as they get, and they're here, and I think they're free, right? Yeah, so I would go pick up some of those. I have some cards with me I can give you. I think the first thing is to remind people this is their Constitution. It should be the people's law. No place for corporations, and we shouldn't just tinker with it. So, you know, a lot of folks should just vote no because it's the Constitution. Remind them the legislature, if there's a problem, has the power to fix it. Then I think I would go to the rights. We have a right today to farm, so what's the problem?
Yeah, why change?
Why change?
Why fix something broke?
And then you can tell them, well, since 1975, unless you were defined as a family farm corporation, you can't farm in Missouri. And giving this right will allow corporations using those court decisions, giving them rights, they'll use the state, that right then to bust all our laws.